Did you know that on most social media platforms, only 1% of users are consistently creating content? This means the other 99% of users are just scrolling and lurking and not reaping the benefits of social networks. In today's video, we're going to talk about how you can become part of that 1%. If you like today's video, be sure to like it, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss future content. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. We personally respond to them and we love talking to you. In the world of internet engagement and internet communities, there's something called the 1% rule. And this states that 1% of users in any given platform or any given social network are creating content on a regular basis. The other 99% of users are typically just scrolling, maybe occasionally engaging in things like liking or commenting or sharing, but otherwise they're just lurking. And in the world of statistics, this is a power law distribution, showing that you have a very small concentrated number of users that are reaping the vast majority of their rewards from actually engaging on these platforms. So what does that mean to you, someone who's trying to leverage digital strategy to grow their business? It means there's a massive opportunity.
You, who is one of the innovators of the industry, should capitalize.
If you can become part of that 1% of users that's actually out there creating content, you're going to be above, you guessed it, above 99% of the other users. And it's actually not that hard. You just need to create content on a consistent and regular basis. So in today's video, we're going to talk more about the history of that 1% rule, and we're also going to break down why people are stuck in that 99%, and how you can move to become part of that 1%. So let's first talk about the actual history behind the 1% rule. It was first mentioned amongst the blogging community in the mid-2000s when different website administrators and bloggers noticed that only 1% of users who were actually in that blogging atmosphere were actually blogging on a regular basis, and the vast majority of people were just traffic on those websites. At first it was more of an anecdotal thing and people saying, this is what we think we see. But as time moved forward, more and more communities started to see the same patterns again and again. And then in 2014, researchers looked at an online community, in this case, an online forum specific to certain health websites, and saw the same pattern. They actually saw that distribution of 1% of people being super users, creating content on a regular basis. Another 9% were consistently engaging, so maybe replying to posts or occasionally, like very rarely, making their own posts. And finally, the remaining 90%-ish of people were just visitors and never actually engaged with content. So in this case, they actually saw a 1%, 9%, and then 90% distribution amongst their users.
You know, it seems to be a pattern.
And now when you look on social media platforms like LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, we start to see the same patterns again and again. And while they're not exactly that distribution, they're very, very close and they still follow a power law curve. So when I look at this, all I see is opportunity. If you can become part of that 1%, you can get the vast majority of the rewards. So why don't more people do it? What we see when we work with clients is a handful of different things, but most of it comes back to fear. They're afraid they're gonna look stupid, they're afraid they don't have something to say, and they're afraid to actually take action. In some cases, people will trick themselves and say, oh, I'll actually start creating content when I'm ready. But of course, you're never actually ready. You need to put yourself out there, you need to create content, and those that do become part of that 1%. And more importantly, they actually get the benefit from these social networks. You stop and think about it for a second, and you look at that power law distribution of 1% of users getting nearly all of the views, all of the engagement on these social media platforms. What that means is that if you can become part of that 1%, you disproportionately, like drastically disproportionately, reap the benefits of actually being active online. So how do you actually become part of that 1%? It all comes back to consistently creating content and publishing it on digital platforms. Now, we have plenty of other videos on our YouTube channel here talking about content strategy, come up with ideas, and how to stay consistent and all of that. But for today's video, I want to give you a few pointers or things, I guess, habits that I see or activities that I see for the people that are actually part of that 1%, what they're actually doing. And spoiler alert, it's not actually anything crazy. So habit number 1 is that they focus on consistency over top of perfection. The people that are part of that 1% don't always have the perfect post, the perfect video, the perfect headshot, but what they do is they show up every single day, every single week, every single month, and they do it consistently. They focus on showing up over top of being perfect. Because if you wait for perfection, it'll never actually come. And they realize that. So when they're 80% there, when they feel pretty good about something, they press the publish button and they don't worry about it. Habit number 2 is they focus on having conversations and not trying to make it some sort of grand performance. So similar to that perfection side of things, instead of trying to think of every single post as something that you're putting out to the world in some grand form, they think of it as a conversation. And remember, we're talking about social networks, things like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. These are social platforms. The point is to actually start conversations with real people. People are part of that 1%, truly understand this, and they focus on starting dialogue, starting conversations. And not only is it easier to actually have that conversation, easier for them to create content, they also reap the rewards of higher engagement, which leads to more views and more conversions. So build the habit of having a conversation and not trying to put on some sort of performative act. And the third habit is to actually build a habit out of creating content. Everyone I know that's part of that 1% of content creators consistently shows up every single day, even when they don't want to. Just like having a good exercise routine or brushing your teeth or anything else you might do on a regular basis, creating content becomes something you just do. There's plenty of days you're not motivated, plenty of days you don't want to do it, but you know in order to show up for your audience, in order to build that engagement, in order to be part of that 1%, you have to get the work done. In other words, content creation becomes a non-negotiable for them. And I will say, as you build that habit, as you build that consistency, as you start building the audiences, you'll start to reap the rewards of being part of that 1% of content creators, and that makes it easier to stay consistent. But again, not perfect. Plenty of days you wake up and you don't want to do it. So let's stop for a moment before we end the video and just go back to what it means to actually be part of that 1% of content creators. The 1% rule says that you are part of the 1% of users on a given social media platform that creates the large majority of the content. That's different for each platform. And for LinkedIn, for instance, what that means is that if you are part of the 1% of content creators, you are posting once a week on the platform. For platforms like Instagram or TikTok, that might mean 2 to 3 times a week, but it's still not every single day, every single hour. You just need to show up consistently. And again, those that do reap all the rewards. So if you as a business leader can be part of that 1%, you're gonna get more eyeballs on your content, which means more leads, faster conversions, and more sales for your business. And of course, in the digital world, this is how buyers want to buy. They want to find people online who are showing up on a regular basis, who are educating people, providing value, and they want to source their vendors that way. And if you are part of that 1% of users, if you're part of that top echelon of content creators, there's no doubt in my mind that customers will find you and they'll want to work with you. So as you go about your week, I want you to think about how you can consistently create content on a regular basis, provide value, show up, and become part of the 1%.